And welcome to Continual. My name is Jean Marie Ward, and I'm here today in the middle of Continual's May the 4th celebration to bring you Writing in a Galaxy Far, Far Away. And talking with me today are three wonderful Star Wars tie-in writers: John Jackson Miller, Michael Stackpole, and Janine K. Spendlove. Welcome, everybody.
Hi.
Now, before we get started, there are people out there who are watching this show and are not necessarily familiar with the world of Star Wars tie-in fiction. So I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourselves and tell folks what you have done in the Star Wars universe. I'm going to start with you, Janine.
So I'm Janine K. Spendlove, and I am the least titled person in this conversation. I have written one Star Wars short story. It's called In Brief, and it is a prequel to the Battlefront novels. And it just explores a couple of the characters in there, primarily focuses on Brand the Bounty Hunter. And it was an absolute joy to write. And beyond that, I have written a lot of original fiction, mostly fantasy, but a little bit of sci-fi. And I just finished, finally, writing the first draft of my military sci-fi retelling of Pride and Prejudice. So now I just need to actually, and I've sent it out to a couple of my readers and they've gotten me some really good feedback. So now I just need to go do the hard work of the edits on it and then, find somebody who wants to publish it. So, hey, if you're listening.
Mike.
I'm Michael Stackpole, and I have written, I think, 8 Star Wars novels and a whole bunch of graphic novels. So I started the X-Wing series and did 5 of those. I wrote I, Jedi. I did 2 books in the, what was that collection called? The New Jedi Order. There we go. I did books 2 and 3. And then, like I say, did a lot of X-Wing comics. And also did Union, which was the marriage of Luke Skywalker and Mara Jade. And all of those were a lot of fun, and these were done back in the 90s. So I was sort of at the beginning of the era of Star Wars fiction.
And I have every single one of them.
Wonderful. Oh, good. We've got a fan club going. I like that. Okay, John.
I am John Jackson Miller. I have written basically whatever they let me write. Knights of the Old Republic comic series for many years. I did the Knight Errant novel and comics series. I did the Lost Tribe of the Sith short stories and comic series. I did novels, including Star Wars Kenobi, Obi-Wan Kenobi's first month on Tatooine. Then I did the New Dawn novel, which they ended up, declaring that to be the first sort of new era Lucasfilm Story Group batch of novels. And then various and sundry other things, stuff for the role-playing game here and there. And the most recent few things I've done have been for the certain point of view books that they've been doing, the big short story collections. I've done a couple of things for that. And then also did a novella for the Canto Bite book they did for episode 8. So just a variety of things. And then when I'm not doing that, I'm fiddling with Star Trek and Mass Effect and Halo and various other licenses.
Okay, cool. Very cool. All
You
right.
also did some really awesome Iron Man comic books.
That is true, and that
I
is
know because you were kind enough to gift them to me.
that's how we met. She shared with me at and I don't know if this is the convention that Mike was at or not, but
So Mike introduced us.
okay, so it was Mid-South Con in Memphis, yeah,
and then you and I, either at that convention or a later one, I can't even remember, we ended up sharing a signing table at the same time.
It was that one, and you shared with me your little device to take credit card.
My Square. Like when Square was a new thing.
And that changed all of our lives.
It did.
Yes. I was the youngster rolling in with the Square thing, and
You
people
kids and your new technology.
That's fine.
Oh my gosh, that was so long ago. But you were kind enough to, you were like, you need to read these comics. I've never read an Iron Man comic. Okay, it was awesome.
Really?
Well, so the only comics I've really read up to that point were all Star Wars comics. And then when John found out I was at the Pentagon at the time, stationed at actually I was stationed on Capitol Hill, but I had been at the Pentagon just prior to that. And he was like, oh, you have to read these Iron Man comics that I wrote. It's all about the Pentagon. So it was pretty cool.
My little claim to fame was during my year, I made Tony Stark the Secretary of Defense. And
he couldn't do any worse than the ones we've had.
Well, he was actually replacing a character who was secretly the Red Skull. So it was a pretty easy job to fill at the time. But yeah, I had striven to sort of be accurate from things because they were trying to sell me as the Tom Clancy of comics. And so everything I was putting in the comics was and I tried to make it all technically correct, right down to when I was going to threaten Washington D.C. with a horrible crash, and I remember having to sign all of our emails that would go back and forth between me and my artist who was in Argentina. A guy whose name really is Jorge Lucas. I would send him all of these things showing where I wanted the C5 Galaxy to crash on the mall, and I had maps and everything. And it was after 9/11, so I put at the bottom, for all of you National Security Agency guys reading this. This is a comic book. I will send you a copy. but yeah, I passed them to Janine to see if they even came close to passing the reality test. But all we have to do is just get close enough to fake it, and that's what it was.
Well, I enjoyed the books, so.
Yes. I can attest the Red Skull was SecDef for about 4 years. I worked under him. Yeah, no questions there.
I am keeping my mouth shut. I'm still on active duty, so I will make no comments about.
It was before your time. No problem.
People
past secretaries of defense.
People should have figured it out, because in the comics, this previous Secretary of Defense was named Del Rusk, which is Red Skull anagrammed. So what I would recommend is just go back, find whoever you didn't like in the administration, and then anagram their names, and you'll find exactly which supervillain they were.
I love it. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm almost scared to ask how you came into writing Star Wars fiction after that story. So I'm going to start with Mike. Mike, how did you get involved in writing Star Wars tie-in work? The novels, the graphic novels. How did you get come into the fold, as it were?
Back when I was starting out, Bantam had the license. So I already had a contract with Bantam for books, and Bantam was using the Star Wars tie-ins as a way to promote authors and build their careers. They had bought a license for a lot of books. The Tim Zahn books had come out, and they were instant bestsellers. So they wanted to do more, and Lucasfilm would not sell them a license to do any more at that time. So they turned around and said, how about we buy a license for the X-Wing computer game?
Mhm.
So they were knocking that around at Bantam, and they called me because I'd done a bunch of computer games. And so they called me and said, what do you think? Should we buy a license to a computer game? Would it be a good idea? You know, will we get readers from the computer playing audience? And I basically told them, based on my experience, no, not a good idea. You know, at that time, you're not going to get any crossover. You know, they're not really readers, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And
I was just gonna say, I didn't even know there was a computer game.
well,
Yeah.
there you go. And so the editor, as we're closing the call, she said, "Oh man, that's really too bad because we were thinking about buying a license to the X-Wing game." And I said, "Oh, Star Wars, buy it."
Mhm.
And she went, "Oh, okay, thanks. You know, appreciate your feedback." And that was the end of the call. And so here it was. I just thought it was a consultancy kind of call, right? And then I live in Arizona, so during the winter months, we're on California time. So it's 6 a.m. on literally on Valentine's Day. I got a phone call from my agent. You know, I'm half awake as I pick up the phone, and she says, "Bantam just offered you 4 Star Wars books." I said yes. And so then it became a question of how was I going to do these, and then to do the graphic novels. I was at lunch. It was at one of the World Science Fiction conventions, and I was at lunch with Lucy Wilson and a couple of other people. And you know, we were just in general talking, and she mentioned comics, and I said, "Oh man, I would love to write comics." And I you know, tried a number of times in my career, but you know, no deal has ever worked. It's all just kind of fizzled. And then 6 months later, I got a phone call from an editor at Dark Horse. They wanted to do an X-Wing comic, and literally he said, "So Lucasfilm said we had to talk to you." and that was that. And the fun thing about those days with approval and how all that stuff worked is that it was a lot looser than it became after the Phantom Menace, such that when I was doing scripts or I was doing the novels, I would put things in footnotes at the bottom of the page. And so in a comic script, I would say, "I'm putting this here because I'm going to pick it up in this novel over there."
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing both of them at the same time. And so I would get almost a tacit approval because the guy who was approving comics was subordinate to the person who approved novels. And then in the novel, I would just say, "Hey, this comes out of the comic," which had already been approved. And so the person who's approving the novels would say, "Okay." And so I never abused that power, but there were some fun things that we got in, including the errant venture. That was how that basically worked its way through, because normally you would not give a Star Destroyer to a civilian of questionable background. But literally, I remember I had a footnote saying Tim Zahn's going to use this in his book. And, you know, my editor from Bantam called up and said, "Tim's using this?" I said, "Yep." He says, "Okay, thanks. Just wanted to know." And that was that.
I'm so happy to know this, Mike. Because I remember noticing these things when I was first reading the books and the comics and like thinking like, "Oh, so clever. They tie it, you know, it's tying in so well across these elements." And it's just fun to hear the process.
Oh, yeah. I mean, all of us back in those days, I mean, one, the authors we knew each other. Anyway, I remember when I was doing I, Jedi, and I called Kevin Anderson up and I said, "Hey, do you do anything more with that Sith temple out of the Jedi Academy trilogy?" He said, "No, why?" And I said, "Oh, because I'm destroying it." And that was that, you know. And so yeah, so it was a lot of fun to be able to do that sort of stuff and make those things kind of weave together and tell stories that way.
Cool. Have you worked on Star Wars games since then, or are you, you know, pretty much in the novels and graphic novels and comic scripts area?
I did, and I think the last thing I did, largely the last thing I did, came out in 2000. I think after that, I did a couple of little pieces, Star Wars Insider Story, and did a graphic novel-esque thing when Wizards of the Coast brought out the role-playing game. But I really have been, 2000 hit. The last book I had hit the New York Times bestseller list. On the same weekend, I was at my 25th high school reunion. So, the ultimate revenge for any nerd, right? Given it, unfortunately, I actually liked the people I went to school with, so, it wasn't much of a revenge. But so I've been largely, away from that and trying to stay spoiler free and everything since then. Not that I wouldn't mind coming back for some of those, large collections of short stories and stuff like that. I mean, I think that would be fun, but largely, and it's been kind of fun having seen the way it was back in those days, and then being able to see the movies and everything without having to worry about what I already know or what I would have to deal with going forward into a project.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, because it's a very intense and very large universe right now. I mean, everything's the butterfly effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just amazing that. And then when you add the short stories, one of the things that astonished me was how many of you had been involved in short stories. And until Janine told me about her short story, I didn't even know there were short stories in the universe. So that's incredibly cool, but incredibly complicating. Yeah.
But the short stories are so fun because they allow particularly characters that are often like a blink and you miss them. Maybe they only have 2 seconds of screen time, or they're a background character or a side character in a novel and don't have any screen time. But it lends so much richness to the universe because every single one of them have a backstory, have a, so I love reading them, and I've loved reading them from the start. I think was the first collection, what was it? Tales of the Bounty Hunter or Tales from Mos Eisley Cantina, I think was
go.
the
Yeah,
first
yeah.
collection.
It was that and then Jabba the Hutt. Yeah.
Yeah, and then so I've always loved them. I've always enjoyed them, and they're just fun because it's always different authors, and so each story just feels like this unique little world because it's a different personality for each character. So I've liked them.
Great. How did you come to write in the universe, Janine?
Oh, okay. So it's really fun and interesting that we are here on this call with Mike and John because they both were pretty integral to that happening. There were other people as well, Aaron Alston being one big key player and Tim Zahn another one, but John very directly helped that happen, and Mike pretty much, so Mike gives this, my watch was just telling me what time it was. Mike gives this really amazing writer's workshop at DragonCon that you can register for. And when I started to take my writing seriously, about a decade ago, a little over a decade ago, I paid for the whole weekend. It was, at the time, I think it was just you, Aaron, and Tim were the instructors, Mike.
Right, yeah.
And I went there with my notebook and my laptop, and oh my gosh, I just took notes after notes after notes. And I learned so much and would keep going back to kind of dip into different classes every year after that. And then I learned a lot, and Mike and I had developed a friendship over the years and things like that. And when I finally finished my novel, Mike very much was like, hey, I run the library at Origins. Would you come when my first novel was coming out? And he said, I want you to come as a guest. And he went all in, I'm gonna, you're gonna be treated like an author, just like everybody else. And you're gonna be the same standing. You're not gonna be lesser tier. And so very first convention with just this one little book that I had self-published. No, I'd done it professionally, hired an artist, hired an editor, did all the things that a publisher would do. But I footed the bill. And Mike had me on panels and treated me like a professional writer because he'd seen my work and he knew what I could do, and it was amazing. And so because of that, in the writer world, people just accepted that I was one of them. Particularly back then, there was very much a stigma against self-publishing, and so I was very scared to do it. And in fact, he was the one who encouraged me initially to do it. And so he didn't just encourage me, he also advocated for me. So mentoring is important, but so is advocacy. And so he kind of put his money where his mouth was and made sure that I still got the same treatment that a traditionally published author would right off the bat. And so I really cut my teeth and learned how to write under Mike and Aaron and Tim's tutelage. And, they give really good feedback and really good critique, and you can only get better. Mm-hmm. And then, as we talked about, and I can't remember if it got recorded or not, or yes, we did. He introduced me to John at a convention that we were all at, and just John immediately was like, "Oh, you're friends with Mike, you're a writer." And John immediately took me under his wing too. And I think that's the beauty of, Jean Marie, you did the same thing too when I met you, and so I think that that's the beauty of this industry. Everywhere I've gone, everybody is immediately taking me under their wing. And so John and I became friends, and I started reading his work, and we, you start seeing each other at these conventions. Well, I went to Comic-Con. Oh goodness, I don't even remember what year. Was it, like 2013?
I think it's probably 13.
Yeah.
Okay.
13. So I went to Comic-Con and knew that John was there. So texted him, was like, "Hey, did you want to," and we figured out our schedules only worked that we could get breakfast like one day. So we met up for breakfast, and it was wonderful. It was fun catching up. And he was just like, "Oh, hey, I gotta go do this like book signing thing." And I'm like, "Oh yeah. For what book?" And of course it was his new Star Wars book, the one that he talked about before. That kind of kicked off the whole canon ever since Disney bought Star Wars. And I was like, yes, I would like to go to this signing. And I would also like to get one of these free books that Comic-Con is giving out.
That's 14 then. That was the one where they had me sign 4,000 books.
Yes.
Yikes.
And one of those was mine.
They were selling for $80 that day. Then they started.
God. I still have mine.
I was like, everybody, it's gonna be everywhere in a month. What are you doing? What are you doing?
But John was a very good friend and made sure I didn't have to stand in a line. He's like, just here, take it, But before he did that, he introduced me to his editor, who happens to run. He was at Del Rey, who happened to be in charge of the Star Wars stuff. And I don't know where I got the gumption from, but I figured, it's not worth, take every chance you're given, right? The worst that can happen is she says no. And I reached into my bag and pulled out an anthology that I had a short story in. It was the first Athena's Daughters. And I handed it to her and I said, "Hey, I've got a story in this. I would love to write for Star Wars. And if you don't like mine, there's a lot of really great stories with a lot of really great authors. Jean Marie, I think you were one of them."
Yes, I was. I had the last story in that anthology.
Yeah. With a lot of really great authors, all women, in this anthology. So even if you don't like mine, you've got a whole plethora of them, because Star Wars needs more women writers. Because there are just, at the time particularly, there just weren't really that many. There were a handful. You could count them on one hand. And she said...
And I was aware of that. And I think that was why, couldn't hurt. You might as well ask.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, because John was very Janine is a writer. He didn't just go, "This is my friend Janine." Well, he was like, "Janine is a writer."
Writing tie-in fiction is very much like applying for a loan. You're going to borrow these characters and you're going to use them. And so what you need to have is a credit history. That's your book. That's showing something physical that you've been in. And I knew you had that. And then references to say that you're not a crazy person who's going to, immediately take control of these characters and say, I have a short story in which I'm going to establish that Luke and Leia were triplets, and there's a third kid out there somewhere, and my story is going to cover that entire thing in 4,000 words. And I knew you weren't going to do that, and I knew you weren't going to do that, and I guess that worked out. So anyway,
trust is surprisingly important in publishing, isn't it?
So this goes back to that whole mentoring and advocacy, and so then after that, I gave her my book. She was very gracious about it. I was like, nothing will probably come of this, but I don't care. I tried. I took my shot. This was pre-Hamilton, or maybe it wasn't, but I wasn't aware of it. But I wasn't going to throw away my shot, So, yeah. And then like 6 months later, I just landed from a flight because I'm a pilot in the Marine Corps, and I just landed from a flight, and I was pulled out my phone, and I was walking up the stairs in the squadron, and I checked, and I had this random email that was like Star Wars short story, and I'm like, what is this, like spam? And I was like, no, I should open it, and I opened it. I'm so glad I didn't delete it. And it was the assistant to the editor, and he very, very was just like, hey, so we were given your name by our editor, and we just were wondering if you were interested in maybe writing a short story that would be canon in Star Wars about, for Star Wars, a Star Wars short story. And I remember just stopping. I was walking up the stairs, and I just sat on the stairs and just started crying. And very grateful to this day that like no Marines happened to come upon me right there. I'm in my flight suit, like just turned in my flight gear, like my helmet and all that stuff, and I'm just sitting there just like crying on the stairs, like, oh, my dreams are coming true. This is all I've ever wanted, And I could not write yes back fast enough. Like, be cool. No, be cool. They don't care. You're a fangirl. Who cares? Let them know. Yes, all caps. I think I did actually not write back immediately. If I recall, I wanted to, but instead, rather than write them immediately, I forwarded it to my husband, and just, it was all exclamation points was all my email to him was. And when I got home that evening, he helped me write a professional, insane sounding email.
Very useful to have somebody do that for you at a time like that.
Yes. And I mean, just for if it hasn't, like, in case that hasn't come clear in this conversation, like I started reading Star Wars, oh gosh, I want to say when I was 14, and I'd been a fan my entire life. Like, and so to me, to be able to join Mike and John and Tim and Aaron and so many other people that I'd been reading since I was a very young teenage girl. I'm not trying to make you feel old, Mike. But you see, like, to me, this was just like, this was my dream. So not only was I getting to create and be a part of the Star Wars universe and contribute to the canon, but I got to do something with these people who had become my friends, my mentors, and people who'd become very important to me and very close to me and like family in many ways. I mean, Aaron would come to my house annually for a writer's workshop and just spend the whole weekend with us until, the last time he came was a couple months before he passed. So it really meant a lot to me to be able to be a part of this big family on many levels.
Great. And John, how did you wind up in the Star Wars family?
Well, I think
because it sounds like it now, family.
Well, yeah, I kind of got adopted into it just by when I was. Star Wars was the first grown-up comic book I ever got, age 9, and I just was obsessively collecting the comics and the games, and the novels, what novels there were after that, yeah, around about the time that I guess Tim Zahn was wrapping up the Heir to the Empire trilogy. That's when I got a job working in the comics industry as editor of a trade magazine for the comics industry called Comics Retailer. I also worked on their consumer magazine, Comics Buyer's Guide. I was about a year and a half into that when I hired a certain Michael Stackpole to be a monthly columnist for Comics Retailer. He was our
It
games.
just keeps being circular here.
Yeah, he was our and this was a case where again, I don't think he and I had never met beforehand. The only reason that we were doing games at all is that basically Magic the Gathering was saving shops everywhere, and the money was flowing into our company like crazy. From that, I remember our ad rep. This is a side story. Our ad rep took out the Wizards of the Coast guys, blew $800 on them one night, and my publisher nearly fired the ad rep over that. And I said, "You don't understand. This is going to be a big, big deal." And I think we ended up getting $500,000 in business out of it. It was, but we realized we actually had to have somebody who knew gaming, in addition to our existing gaming columnist, in order to branch out, because I think Scott Herring was the first one we had, and someone suggested, well, Mike Stackpole, he's been a game designer and he knows all the stuff, and I said, yeah, but can he write? And they said, oh well, yes, he's actually he's actually a novelist. And so he starts hitting his deadlines immediately, which is not something that everybody automatically did. And I realized, okay, we have a pro writer here. And then I read his columns and I realized there's this wonderful fount of wisdom here that is in our magazine, only for the retailers to see. But he was ahead of the curve on so many things in this time. You are talking about podcasting 15 years before it became, the thing. I mean,
back then it was called internet radio, and that's how I met Mike. I interviewed him for our internet radio show back in 2003.
And in North Carolina, I remember. Yep.
And it was wonderful stuff. And the only sad thing about it was I knew it was only being seen by the retailers that were getting this. I mean, they were a great bunch of people, but I was like, man, I really wish we had sort of an equivalent of Time magazine or something, because this is great stuff. But what ended up happening is I in 2003 I got the chance to write for Marvel. I wrote Crimson Dynamo, which was the Soviet version of Iron Man. And then I wrote Iron Man for the year. Then I was 2004 on a family reunion trip to Oregon. And because I worked for the comics magazines, I said, well, I'll just drop in on Dark Horse. And they gave me the nickel tour. And at the end of it, I saw that Randy Stradley was there, and I said, "Oh, he's the Star Wars editor. Let me go drop in there with my big stack of Iron Man comics." Again, the credit card, not the credit card, but the
credit rating.
Yeah, it's the credit history. This shows I'm not insane. It shows that I've actually done this stuff, and he hired me to do a fill-in issue for Star Wars Empire, and that went well enough that in 2005 he asked me to write the Knights of the Old Republic comic series, and a couple of things that happened then. One is that this was right when Michael talked about how it was easier writing before the Phantom Menace. Mm-hmm. Well, I was coming in right as Revenge of the Sith was done. And so as far as everybody was concerned, George was done with Star Wars. The Clone Wars hadn't really, developed as something he was going to, spend a whole lot of time on. And it was more or less like, okay, we have all these different parts of the timeline we can write in, and we can go do whatever we want and not worry so much. And so that was a cool thing and a cool place to be, with what I did. And I ended up working in like 4 or 5 different parts of the timeline, just expanding and expanding. And, there's not much similar to any of the different time frames. I mean, one is the golden age of the Jedi, one is all Sith all the time. I mean, one is Gilligan's Island with Sith. I mean, it's or Lord of the Flies is probably the better way to put it, but Gilligan's Island works too. But yeah, so there's that. Also the other thing that happened is, again, this is when I was still at the company. I had been kicked upstairs to run special projects for like the car division, or not car division, but for the whole company. And the car division was doing a thing in Scottsdale where they have the big automobile auction. And it was whatever I was there to do was not very memorable. But I had, again, I knew I had my first Star Wars comic book coming out in a week, and I dropped in to see Mike, and I said, "Can you tell me anything? Give me any advice? Can do anything?" And he did say, "Yeah, your life is about to be turned upside down." And probably the most important thing he told me at the time was 3 words: never surrender canon. And here he didn't mean the cannons on the field, although it technically might have been like that. It was, you've been the one hired to do this, not this person on the message board, not that person on the message board, not this other person. Your decisions have some weight behind them, and yeah, you're going to get feedback from every direction, because anything you write in this universe is going to invalidate somebody else's fan fiction. Anything you write is going to invalidate somebody else's imagined history or future for a character. But you're the one that signed the contract, and you're the one whose name is under the logo. And, just proceed, both humbly knowing that you're dealing, you have that authority, but at the same time, be ready when the brickbats come to sort of handle it. And indeed, the very first issue of Knights of the Old Republic came out, and I discovered within an hour, somebody pointed out, I believe it was Darth Nuke on the Star Wars message boards on Dark Horse. Oh, you got the start year for the Mandalorian Wars wrong, and actually I didn't. They got the year wrong over on whoever wrote the text page for the BioWare video game website. But regardless, it was on me. And so I said, it only looks wrong. I'm going to make it right. And so I ended up writing a story to make both cases correct. So but yeah, I mean, no,
that's what Tim likes to call spackling.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
There was a lot of spackling in the early days. Yeah.
The phrase I use is eating your mistakes, which is basically what the baker does with the cookies that don't go right. You can usually make a something else out of them. I mean, we got at Knights of the Old Republic, also that first issue, we got Jarail's species wrong, what it looked like, because we had her as an Arcanian, but she had pointy ears and snow white skin and tattoos and all these things Arcanians didn't have. I ended up getting 3 plots out of that. And I could go back later and say, oh yeah, we meant to do that. So yeah, that is what you kind of learn doing tie-in stuff. And once you've done Star Wars, that passport kind of gets you into all of the other your franchises that are out there, because the presumption is that Star Wars has exceptionally high quality control, and it's correct.
Is that the hardest or the greatest challenge of writing in someone else's universe? The conflicts, or is it the pushback you get from the fans? What is the greatest challenge of writing in someone else's universe?
Well, one of the things is, it all depends on what else is going on in the universe, whether it's a moving target or not, whether things are in motion, whether somebody else is working on something else in another department that you don't have any knowledge of, and suddenly you have something new to spackle over because you had no notion that they were going to do it. Again, Star Wars, and Mike knows this a lot better than I do. The expanded universe didn't really come about on purpose. It kind of
grew organically.
Yeah, and it sort of coheres after the fact. Yep. but now we're in a realm where in 2021, what they do in Star Wars is also what they do in Star Trek, and all the video game tie-ins that are out there, all these other things. And just the challenge always is, you're telling a story in a shared universe where there are other parallel, projects going on, and you might not be privy to everything, and they may not be privy to everything, because things are changing all the time. And so I am, with my novels currently, I'm writing for Star Trek. They're all connected with the streaming service shows. So I did two Discovery novels, and I just did a Picard novel. I'm constantly, well, it's not just good enough to know what's going to happen in the script. You've got to actually watch the episode to know what really this character looks like, or really whatever happened, or whatever. But these are just occupational hazards of what it is now. So,
but thank goodness the source material is so awesome.
That's true. I mean, it's
a joy to watch. I mean, like, Discovery has been on fire. It's been so good.
Was it a challenge? Was this a challenge for you, connecting with the rest of the universe, Janine?
So I had a really fantastic advantage and a really unique position, I think, in that, aside from me, the one fear that I had going into this was that somehow I was going to ruin Star Wars. Like, I was going to find a way to wreck it. And that I would write something that would just be utter trash, and that everybody would hate me because I had written something that was just garbage and ruined Star Wars, which I know is a ridiculous fear. And yet I still had it, because this was something that was very precious and important to me. And I knew it was to millions of other people. But as far as writing in the universe, I came in very early on, from when Disney bought it. Disney bought Lucasfilm and was kicking things off. So while I was not as early as John, the first of the canon, I was right there at the beginning. They released my story right before The Force Awakens came out. And so I was writing it well before then. And I was writing it before names and characters had really been released. And so when I sat down and talked to the editor and was pitching the editors and was pitching the story, because they told me what they wanted me to do. They wanted me to tell a backstory about this bounty hunter and about why she would join the rebellion, and talk about wanting to tell a really rich, thorough backstory, and you only have like 3,500 words to do it. That is, writing a novel is easy. It's not easy, but compared to, if I had a novel to tell this character's backstory, I easily could have done it. Shoot, I probably could have written a trilogy about her. She was awesome. Brand is awesome. But to try to compress it into a short story, oh my, every word matters. Every single word matters. And so I was very grateful that I had written a ton of short stories for various anthologies at that point, because this is definitely a craft. It's a different type of writing. But when I talked to them and was pitching my ideas, I asked them what my kind of left and right lateral limits were. What were my constraints? And I was like, because like as a pilot, you have an envelope, the aviation envelope, and as long as you stay in the envelope, you're safe and your airplane will fly. But as soon as you take it outside of the performance envelope, you're going to crash and die a fiery death. So I don't want to go outside the envelope. What's the envelope? And they were like, oh, well, everything's new, and you know, everything in the expanded universe is now considered legacy, and so you're not tied to any of that. You can do whatever you want. And I went, you mean whatever I want? And they're like, you can do whatever you want. We'll tell you when you turn in your story if it's wrong or if you need to change something. But you know Star Wars, you love Star Wars, we trust you, so do what you want. And this was both like amazing and also kind of scary, because I was like, this universe that I'm very well versed in, because I'd read everything in the expanded universe, you know, a lot. And, you know, to me, it was just, and so I'm like, that's not like a thing anymore. So, I mean, it is, those books are not gone. Like, you could still go back and read them. I still do. In fact, I just recently reread the X-Wing books again because I love them so much. And so it was awesome. It was liberating, and a little bit terrifying. And so, but there was also still some problems, because the main character, I gave her the name of Loudon with the nickname of Ren. And that's what her family called her. And then I get the note back from the editor saying, you got to change her nickname. Her nickname can't be Ren. And I was like, that seems kind of weird, but okay. Because like some of the other things they had me change was, I had a Pauline character who was a bit like a gecko in that she could, or a bit like a chameleon in that she could change her skin tone if she touched something. And they're like, no, the Pauline can't do that. Change that. And I was like, oh yeah, I can change that. That's not a problem. Because that, you know, it's your alien species. You don't want them to be able to have that ability. Fine. I was totally fine with that. And that was like the one major change they had, and a few other like happy to glad changes. And then this, like, you have to change her name. That's really weird, but okay, I'll change it. Her nickname is now Lao instead of Ren. And then of course, the Force Awakens comes out while I'm deployed with my Marines, and I'm just like, oh, I get it.
Now we know. Now you know.
Now I know. Okay, so that was kind of my one experience, but it was very, you know, wild. And I don't want to say wild west, because the story group very much had control on things. It was very clear that they were being very careful in the structure, but you know, it was very easy in that regard. It was a dream to work with them, to be honest.
Mike, what about you? What was the greatest challenge you faced in working in the Star Wars universe?
Well, I think in general, taking a half step back, I think the toughest thing in writing tie-ins, no matter what property you're dealing with, is that you have to prove to the reader that you know the universe and love the universe as much as they do. If you don't, you know, they will toss your book aside. Or at least when I was writing, they would toss your book aside. Now they will start a website which is author name here sucks. And they will complain about, what you did and make
oh my, no, get with the times. They will not start a website. They will have a Twitter handle that says at Mike Stackpole sucks. And,
right, okay, yeah. And they'll do a bunch of TikToks.
Or TikTok or something.
Yeah,
they will declare a crusade where they go and they attack your Amazon rating, not realizing that by bombing your reviews, they're causing the Amazon algorithm to go nuts.
Yeah,
sending your book out to everybody in the world.
Yeah,
that's the greatest self-own, I think.
You know,
don't tell them. That way, people won't get their books up there.
I think with the X-Wing books, I was very, very lucky, because they were taking it was a license on a subsidiary product, so everybody wasn't paying as much attention there. They told me that they wanted military science fiction set in the Star Wars universe. About 2-3 weeks later, I got a phone call and said, oh, you probably want to use Wedge Antilles. And I mean, Wedge was a character I would have used anyway. He fit the way that I write tie-in stuff. And I realized something, and I phrased a question to my editor in a way that got me got me the answer I wanted, which I said is, hey, I can't use the major characters without special permission, right? And they immediately came back and said, yeah, you're right. You can't use the major characters without special permission, which is good because I didn't want to. If I had to use Luke, one of the things I knew from talking to Tim and talking to other people, and I knew just from having written BattleTech books, everybody knows who Luke Skywalker is. And I may write the best Luke Skywalker ever, and it's what 99% of the people see as Luke Skywalker. But that other 1% is going to be very, very vocal that I got it absolutely wrong. And so, you know, I really had to push to get to have a whole new cast of characters, or I'd push myself to create a new cast of characters and build that out, and see where we're going to go from there. The other thing was very funny about this. I was given a set of 4 novels. Up to that point, Star Wars novels either came in singles or in trilogies. And the weekend that I had been given that, I was at a convention in Biloxi, and my editor from Bantam was there. And at the Meet the Guests thing, Tom Dupree, my editor, announced that I had been given 4 X-Wing books. Mm-hmm. Throughout the convention, people kept coming up to me saying, hey, congrats on the trilogy, congrats on the trilogy, congrats on the trilogy. And so I knew instantly that everybody out there was thinking it's going to be 3 books, which is why the X-Wing series was built the way it was. It's a trilogy. It ends with one of those award things. Everybody knows that's how trilogies end. And then we have another book. I mean, spoiler alert, I guess, but you know, when everybody's getting their just desserts and Luke Skywalker says to Corran Horn, hey, you know, you're from a Jedi family. Come on, let's recreate the Jedi. And I remember when I was writing that section of the book, I gave Corran 2 paragraphs to consider what a great honor this was and what a wonderful thing it would be. And the very next line is, nope, got something else to do. Because I knew every reader would sit there and scream going, are you nuts? Because that was, I mean, that's everybody's dream, you know, for Luke to say to him, you know, come on, be a Jedi with me.
No, I was with Corran. I was with Corran.
Well, okay. Well,
but you also wrote right up my, I mean, I ended up being a military pilot. So well, you right up my alley. So yeah. So for me, the most difficult stuff was not really, I mean, they pretty much let me do whatever I wanted to with the universe. They gave me permission to use the characters. They only said no once, and that was, I'd asked a question about Mandalorians, and I think there was something else they wanted to do with them, apparently. But otherwise, I mean, it was great. It was an absolute breeze and a joy to work on that stuff. And it was, I do remember one of the other things that was fun at the time, because I had done a bunch of BattleTech novels. And I remember seeing on one of the Star Wars boards, when the X-Wing books were being talked about, there was one very irate Star Wars reader who said, who is this Mike Stackpole and why should we read him? And one of the other guys who was a BattleTech reader says, you guys are so lucky. You know, our loss is your gain. And it was like, wow, to have fans that are going to be that, you know, advocate that much was pretty cool. So for me, there really was no difficulty, you know, beyond realizing, and that was the strange thing. And you know, I told John that this will change your life forever. It'll just rejigger everything you do in your life. When I realized this, I was in New Orleans, and a friend of mine, Scott Herring, who John mentioned earlier, we were sitting down having dinner, and Scott had told me what he was doing. He asked what I was doing, and I said, hey, I got a contract for a bunch of Star Wars novels. And we chatted the way friends do about that sort of stuff. And a couple at the next table got up to leave, and the man of that couple
got a piece of paper from the waiter and slapped it down in front of me and says, "I heard you got something to do with Star Wars. I want your autograph." and it was like, holy mackerel, this just the reach of Star Wars and the impact that it's had culturally and everything like that. I mean, it totally still blows my mind. There are people who have named their children after Corrin. This is, I mean, unbelievably gratifying, but mind blowing. So it's wonderful to know that you can write stories that will have an impact that will affect people beyond just the give them 6 hours of escape, but will leave an impression that they want to carry forward into the future. It's a absolutely stunning and wonderful thing.
That is wonderful. And I mean, I can see where that would be one of the most gratifying things that any writer, because you're effectively given immortality in that much, because your concepts, your ideas are carrying forward to future generations. But let's go a little bit differently, because we're kind of coming up on the end of our time, unfortunately, because this panel obviously could go on for a very long time. But what do you consider your greatest achievement in the Star Wars universe? That moment, or with something else, something you did?
I mean, for me, one, I think writing iJedi.
Mm-hmm.
I think iJedi has had such a response for so many people. I think that's probably my greatest achievement there. But I do remember when I was writing the Union comic, and I was writing issue 3 of the Union comic, where Luke and Mara Jade get married. That was the only time I freaked out in all the time that I worked on Star Wars. There was a point where I'm going, oh my God, I am marrying 2 icons.
Mm-hmm.
This will have impact. And so, for the course of about 10 minutes, I kind of lost it, and then, collected myself and got about the job. But that was one of those moments of realizing, holy mackerel, you're riding the tiger and you really don't want to fall off. So.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, John? What's your greatest achievement in the Star Wars universe?
I don't know, survival. No, well, because every and I don't mean in any sense like the job's going to kill me or anything like that, or even so much longevity. It's just more of a thing of every time you start a new project, you have no idea how you're ever going to finish it. And you have no idea what it's going to look like when it's done. And the fact that you actually get to the end of it and it coheres somehow into something. I mean, that's, and I've had this happen a few different ways. One of the things we mentioned, you said, Mike, about how, you didn't want to necessarily write characters that people were familiar with, because then they would judge, against the actor or actress. Well, I mean, when I did the New Dawn novel, which was a prequel to Rebels, this is again part of what they're able to do now with the Lucasfilm Story Group, which is they're able to actually tell stories about characters you haven't seen yet. And so, I'm always hearing from people saying, how happy they were with the characters, how they turned out in A New Dawn, relative to how they are in the Rebels TV series. Even the Vanessa Marshall, who did Vanessa did the voice of Hera, and it's like, I never saw the TV show. If we're anywhere close to it, it's just because we had good feedback from the executive producers, and then I guessed right. And this comes up again and again when I did the Enterprise War book, which was the Captain Pike novel. I had not seen Anson Mount do Captain Pike yet, a novel which is, by the way, dedicated to Michael Stackpole. but yeah, I mean, so that's one whole kind of success where if you actually could get close, I mean, that you feel great about that. But then otherwise, just seeing how people respond to things and the longevity of some of the characters and stories. One of the things that's happened over the last year is that due to people having a lot of spare time and a lot of money, there is nothing hotter in this world than Dark Horse's Star Wars comics. The value of these things has just absolutely ballooned and skyrocketed, and
no.
Well, yeah, it's good to know. Yeah, I have a bunch of my books sitting.
I just found a box of my old ones sitting.
Well, I have a batch of mine that are sitting down at CGC waiting to be slabbed with my signature series signatures on them. But I mean, you know, these books are now being reprinted for the fourth time. The Knights of the Old Republic is getting its omnibus edition in July. 1,344 pages, and the people who are reading that today are looking at it like we wrote it all at once. And the fact that the story seems to sort of cohere, even though it was over the course of 4+ years, multiple editorial, changes, multiple
I remember
multiple artist regimes. The fact that it coheres at all feels like an achievement and accomplishment that is just entirely dumb luck, but also us trying to just get it all to connect as much as possible. So yeah, I mean, these are any project getting to the end of it and succeeding and connecting with readers is great, but some you just wonder how they landed, how you were ever able to get the plane to come in.
Yeah. Well, that's something I'm sure that you're familiar with on many levels, Janine. So what is your proudest achievement as part of the Star Wars universe?
So I was giving this a lot of thought because obviously I don't have the depth and breadth that Mike and John have, and I didn't deal with any named characters, the big characters or anything like that. But it's twofold. First, and I have to thank Alexander Freed for this, he created such an amazing character for me to delve in on. And it was amazing to write a short story, a story that focused on a woman in her 40s, so a middle-aged woman who was Black, who was also LGBT. And it just was a representation we didn't have in the Star Wars universe at the time, and still need more of. And so to write a story about her, this very underrepresented demographic, was phenomenal. And the other thing too that I made a point of doing that I don't think anyone has ever noticed is I specifically did not include any named white males in my story. So every single character in that story is either a woman or a person of color or an alien. But the thing that I am, I guess, happiest with, I thought, if this is the only thing I ever write for Star Wars, I'm gonna go guns blazing. And yeah, sorry, I know I use so much military speak. So I can't help it. 21 years, I can't help it. But I'm going to go all in, and I'm going to name as many characters as I can for friends and family. So I got so many. I killed off Mike. I killed off Caitlin. And the other thing that I did is I was like, everybody's always playing Sabacc in Star Wars, and I'm not going to have my military members do this because we do not play. If Sabacc is to poker, we don't play poker in the military. I've never seen it. I'm sure some people do, but I've never seen it in my 21 years. We play some variation of spades, whether it's euchre or hearts or something like that. So I put in a new game, called it Lifters. So that's what my military members in the short story do. They play Lifters. And lastly, I canonized the late, very great Aaron Alston and named a planet for him. And the editors, bless them, when I did it, it was very obvious. And they were like, this is wonderful. We're definitely keeping this. And we know why you did it. And so he's there. He's got a whole planet named for him in the Star Wars universe. And he's part of the Star Wars canon where he belongs.
That's wonderful. I know we could go on really a long time, but unfortunately we've sort of already passed our hour, but that's okay. But in closing, I'd like everybody to tell me and our viewers where they can find you and your work on the web. Starting with you, Janine.
I'm on the internet as either Janine K. Spendlove or Janine Spendlove, depending on how many letters they allow in your name. So, but Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, I'm sorry, I don't do the TikTok. I have security concerns.
And it's also hard to dance in combat boots.
I have done one TikTok. My daughter's 21, so she had me do a TikTok on hers with her once. It was fun.
Mm-hmm.
But I am mostly on Instagram. And I do have a website that's mostly just like a repository, like a list of the stuff I've written. You can find my stuff, I think at this point, mostly on Amazon, but you can try various other places, maybe use bookstore, I don't know. But yeah, that's it.
Cool. John?
JJM Faraway on Twitter, John Jackson Miller on Instagram, John Jackson Miller on Facebook. Farawaypress.com. I got behind the scenes notes on just about every story I've done. Just to quickly hit some of the stuff that I've got either out or coming out. My Ray Sloan story is in The Empire Strikes Back, Certain Point of View book that's out just now. There's a new book that just came out Tuesday, and I have not even gotten a copy of it myself, but you mentioned like Mos Eisley, the Tales from Mos Eisley. Star Wars is now putting out collections of stories from Star Wars Insider magazine. So volume 1 came out on Tuesday. Volume 2 has already been announced. I don't know who the slate is what the slate is in that one. I've got the lists for volume 1. I haven't got the list for volume 2 yet, but yeah, those are coming out from Titan. And so I think volume 2 is later in the year. I have that giant Knights of the Old Republic omnibus coming out July 7th. And then, if I'm allowed to mention it, my Star Trek Picard novel is for Cristobal Rios, the Han Solo-like character who's actually cooler than Han in a lot of ways. He's certainly drunker than Han in a lot of ways. And that's called Rogue Elements, and that comes out. Rogue is a good word to use. Rogue Elements that comes out in August. So may the Force live long and prosper.
Yes, indeed, and May the 4th too. On May the 4th. And Mike, we're closing with you. Where can folks find you on the web? And certainly, if you've got anything coming out soon, we want to hear about it.
Let's see, at Mike Stackpole on Twitter. That's probably where I'm most active. I have a Patreon project, which is patreon.com/Michael A. Stackpole. And I think I have 2 books coming out this year. One is a Gears of War novel. That'll be out in September. And then I have a Dark Souls novel, which will be coming out in Japan sometime in the next 3 months. And I'm not sure when it'll be out in the English language, but there we go there. You know, as John had pointed out, you know, once you've got Star Wars in your repertoire, you know, all sorts of tie-in properties are willing to consider you to work on them. So,
but I have questions we don't have time for, Mike. But did you write this in Japanese, or did someone translate it?
No, it got translated. I wrote it in English. It got translated. Yeah.
I was like, did you speak a whole other language? And I just didn't know.
Not that I know of. But it was very weird when you're given source material that's in Japanese, you know, and having to figure out how you're going to use it. So yeah.
Yeah, Google Translate never quite does the job.
Well, and especially, you know, again, I wouldn't even know what characters to type in necessarily. So
You need a whole new keyboard, or
yeah.
have one of those screens that allow you to draw, and those are expensive.
Yeah,
My
I had
husband's
to.
an artist, so
I had to locate a Klingon advisor so to handle the Klingon language parts.
well, yeah. Yeah, and that said, the Japanese that I worked with were absolutely great and got me everything I needed. But you know, some of it, when you get this wonderful Dark Souls source book with all the art and everything like that, is wonderful. But not being able to immediately attach names to things, yeah, it can be kind of crazy.
oh, that's a problem. That's a problem. I hear a whole new panel coming up, but unfortunately, we're going to have to cut it here. And may the 4th be with you all and with you out there in the audience. Thank you for joining us. And thank you, Michael, Janine, John, and good night for Continual, the
Bye-bye.
never-ending convention.